My name is Jeana Eve Klein. I have been teaching at Appalachian State University for just over 16 years. I'm professor of fibers and assistant chair for curriculum in the art department. The Turchin Center has always been an important part of my experience in Boone, both as an educator, as an artist, and as a community member. When I was asked to join the board about a year and a half ago, I very happily said yes. I see it as a great opportunity to help build the bonds and strengthen the connection between the art department and the Turchin Center. It's a way for me to get a little bit of a behind-the-scenes peek at the inner workings of the Turchin Center and to know what's happening in the future, perhaps before the general public might know. And I also see it as a way to be part of building what that vision and what that future is for the Turchin Center. And I'm really excited to be working with a center that does have such a forward-thinking vision about what its role can be in the community and in the university. Fibers is my primary medium, both as an artist and as an educator. I really worked with fibers my entire life, but I never knew it was a thing until I was in college and took a weaving class kind of on a whim as a break for my pre-architecture classes. And I was instantly hooked and have not looked back since. I think of myself as kind of a fibers generalist. I can do almost everything, at least a little bit. And in my teaching, I span all the processes from dyeing and printing to embroidering and quilting and paper making and basketry and knitting and crochet and soft sculpture, and I could just keep listing things. And in my own work, I have primarily worked in mixed media quilts and embroidery for many years. My mixed media quilts are based on abandoned houses that I explore, in which I imagine narratives for their pasts. In these pieces, I take tons of photographs in the houses and then print them onto recycled fabric using a desktop Epson printer, sew it all together, and then kind of paint my own additions to the story afterwards. My small embroideries are counted French knots, so they're really obsessive and they're all about the labor involved in making and the value of the hand and how labor is or isn't valued in the artwork, in the art world and the larger world. More recently, though, my work has really shifted a lot. After the election and inauguration of Donald Trump, I began making more text-based work, things that were both overtly political and more quietly so. So I was critiquing my own relationship to social media through a political lens, as well as creating some installations and community-based projects, all text-driven at their center. And then the pandemic struck. In mid-March, I and my students left the studio, assuming that we would be back a week and a half later after spring break to continue where we left off. My weaving students had just threaded the looms with their first major projects ready to finish, and I was eager to have a week to myself working in my studio on some projects underway. And then we all got the news that the university would not be reopening, and I had to quickly think about how to translate this process involving giant specialized looms in the studio into things that students could do on their own at home. And so I basically set my own studio work aside, or what I thought of as my own studio work, and started weaving instead. And I began weaving on and in and with anything I could find in my home, anywhere that I could stretch two long linear things together and weave other things within it. And for me, it was a way to both model for my students that you don't have to be limited by unideal circumstances. You don't have to be limited by not having access to what you had access to the week before. But it was also a really good way for me to keep challenging myself and to be able to keep making in a time when everything is uncertain and when it is really hard to carve out the time for my studio practice and to stay focused on what I had been working on up to this point. I have also, in the past few months, been making many, many masks. I feel like it's my contribution to trying to help end the horror of this pandemic. I'm not a scientist, so I can't help make a vaccine or develop new treatments for COVID-19, but I can help prevent its spread by making masks and giving away hundreds of masks, and also trying to develop new designs for masks that might be more effective or more likely to be worn by people. For example, Gator style masks are very popular, but that thin knit fabric is useless in preventing the spread of the virus. So I came up with a pattern for making a Gator style mask, but out of 3 layers of woven fabric. And it's easy to pull up and down and also helps to prevent the spread of coronavirus. And because I couldn't find an existing pattern and made my own, I thought that other people might have that same challenge. So I created a YouTube video to put out there for anybody else who might also be trying to come up with a Gator style mask that is useful in this scenario. This is my studio right now. And while I am profoundly grateful to have a home in which we have enough space that we can create school for my kids, I kind of wish that their school wasn't in the space that, until a few weeks ago, was exclusively my studio. My ironing board on a couple of select days a week becomes my husband's standing desk on the days in which he is the primary parent to supervise the kids' schooling while I am teaching at the university. You can see on the wall some of my past text-based pieces that are hanging out in storage in the hopes of one day venturing out into the world again. And now, condensed into one end of the studio, is the space in which I work. And primarily that work right now is making masks and weaving. So I do have some text-based pieces on the walls that hopefully will one day be finished. But then I also have a little frame loom demonstrating some more complex patterns for the eventuality of moving off of campus again and students still continuing to work. All of my fabric comes from my late grandmother's church quilting group. They hand me tons and tons of scraps, and I love that it all comes with its own history to me. And then I have my trusty sewing machine, which takes so much abuse as I force it to go through layers and layers of paint and print and such. But for now, it's mostly sewing masks. And then piled up on my desk, I have the knitting I've been working on to demonstrate to my students, as well as my large screen monitor for when I am working in Photoshop. And then I have my cutting table, which again is dominated by all of the fixings of masks underway. I have also made masks printed with my own face and have started using the bands from the little pot holder weaving kits to create ear loops for masks that my children actually will wear because they are comfortable enough for them to keep on. In normal times, I travel pretty frequently to stay connected and engaged with the larger art world. I try to get to New York at least once or twice a year. I go to Miami and LA and Chicago, and anytime I'm traveling just for family reasons, I always make sure I get to at least one museum or gallery. And obviously that's not possible right now. So, I do think it's critically important to experience art in person, but when that isn't possible, it's that much more important to maintain connections and relationships in other ways. So I have been relying on the internet and Instagram and all of those online platforms that much more to stay connected to people and see what people are working on and be part of a larger art community. My challenge for you, should you choose to accept it, is to make your own weaving in your home. All you need are 2 sets of long linear materials. Almost anything can act as threads. One set will be your warp threads, which are typically held under tension and they'll be parallel to each other. And then your other set will be your weft threads that get woven in between all of those warp threads. So you could make a basic plain weave construction in which every other thread is up and then down, or you could try something more complex like a twill weave where you weave over and under more than one thread and then offset them row by row. You can use almost any kind of materials, from really tiny things like blades of grass to really large scale like bed sheets woven together and laid back on top of your bed. So I look forward to seeing what everyone creates.